Okay, we should probably begin. So let's have a little test on our. You know, I don't want to say anything mean, but Paula might be crazy. So.
You think she's dead, right?
Still living. All right, you guys, I have some good news for you. So, little bit of good news start off. Paula Morano is still alive. So, yay! Kind of an inside joke. Also, happy St. Valentine's Day. One person offered it back. The rest of you people are dead to me, except for Paula Morano. She's still alive. So I just mentioned that because I was supposed to celebrate the Mass for her husband, Jean. And I could see Jean, but every time I saw Jean Morano, it came out Paula Morano. Anyhow, so somebody noted I'm not wearing my cleric, and I decided this morning not to wear my cleric, because usually I have to tell you, I love to mock St. Valentine's Day, and I have all these jokes because, you married people are showing off your marital bliss. So I'm always like, I'm going to get drunk and scream at a cat or something. Anyhow, this morning I decided, the same way people wear green on St. Paddy's Day and say they're Irish, so I decided, well, if I can't beat them, I'll join them. So I kind of thought, well, I could be St. Valentine. I'm skipping his whole story. So I kind of thought, I'm just going to wear red today and pretend like I'm Italian. There you go. I'm an Italian lover. Na. Oh, that's sweet. She owes me money. Anyhow, yeah, that's why he wears red. Do you guys want to hear the story of Valentine? Oh. So he was a martyr. He baptized before he was executed, he baptized a jailer's daughter who had lost her sight, and the jailer. When he does, this miracle happens. Her sight is restored. So he's executed, but before he's executed, he sends a message to her, remember your Valentine. So on the Feast of St. Valentine's, you're supposed to remember who opened your eyes up to love. Then she took his body and buried it by one of the gates of Rome and planted an almond tree. So the colors are pink and red. Red because he shed his blood. Pink because the almond blossoms are pink. So for those who are wearing pink or red, clearly, like me, you're lovers. So the rest of you people, get on board, people. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. So finishing up, actually, the book of Genesis. We're doing the Joseph story. It ends with Joseph. And what everybody knows about Joseph is his multicolored coat. So truth be known, the story of Joseph, it starts with him being a tattletale. He's kind of obnoxious. But he is the favorite child. He's the favorite child, and his father gives him a coat of many colors. So just to explain that, if you're Jewish, you would realize, That's what the high priest wore. So the priesthood is not going to start until Moses, hundreds of years later, but it's an image of priesthood. And like I did have a slide to show you of what it would have looked like, because this sounds kind of strange. There's still that custom today in Semitic society. You have these bright, multicolored coats of the favored one. But the problem is, it creates this jealousy among his brothers. He's already tattled on his brothers once. Then he's given this coat of favor. And really, of all people, Jacob, his father, should have realized the danger of playing favorites. But he's a teenager, and he has these two dreams. And the two dreams, I'm not going to go over them because I have a lot to get through. But the two dreams are about the future. And it's important to remember these dreams, because remember, it says the sun and the moon bow down before him, and 12 sheaves of wheat bow down. That is his brothers. And he's angered his family by telling him that dream. And even his father says, "Why wouldn't your mother and I bow down to you?" Now, just to explain, the father's symbol is the sun. The mother's symbol is the moon. So Rachel is the mother of all Jews. She's the mother of Judaism. And what is her symbol? Oh, okay. The moon. So Mary is the mother of the church. So what is Mary's symbol? All I heard was murmur. What are you, Italians? Use your hands. Put some passion into it. The moon. There's a song, an Italian song about a moon. When the moon hits your eye, it's a pizza. Oh, wait. Yeah. So, in the book of Revelation, Mary is standing on a moon, which means she's the new mother of the church. That was Rachel's image. So, Old Testament has a mother of the people of God. Mary is the people. So, that's why the moon is associated with Mary. But he says, why would your mother and I bow to you? The mother is the moon. And Joseph's brothers react in anger. So, okay, now he's kind of on, he's ticked off a lot of people. The dream will only make sense later. And it's an odd dream because sheaves of grain, why it's odd is that the Jews, they were shepherds. They weren't farmers. What grain? That makes no sense. So later, his father tells his Joseph to go check on his brothers. Okay, he's going to be a tattletale again because they're up to no good. Go check on your brothers in Shechem. Now later, you have to know what happened in Shechem. That's really kind of key. And he goes and the brothers aren't there. And he runs into this stranger who tells him where his brother is. What great luck is it? Where his brothers is. And his brothers see him in his coat, and they decide to kill him. But then the third plan was Judah's plan. That's kind of key. Judah thinks of selling him in. So you have Reuben, and Reuben, one who later will rend his garment that he's so sad. Reuben's the oldest, but really Reuben is an awful person. So is all of them. Judah is as well. But so they come back and they put goat's blood on the robe and take it to their father and says, oh, he must have been killed by, wild animals. So coat and goat. And the brothers are shaken when they see their father's reaction at the loss of a child. He is so upset, it actually moves his brothers. I say that because that's the beginning of their conversion, is watching somebody else in pain. And Israel, Jacob, their father, says that he'll go down to Sheol, death, in mourning. And the odd part is the trickster Jacob, the trickster Jacob, father, is now tricked by his sons using the same thing he tricked his father with, clothing and goat. Do you get what goes around comes around? Does that make sense? So you have this part of the story, and he's sold into slavery, eventually into Egypt. Then all of a sudden the story ends, and there's another story sandwiched into the Joseph story, and it's the Judah story. And you have to think, well, why are you stopping that story and now jumping years ahead into Judah? Why would the Bible do that? And hopefully I'll explain that. I don't know. So remember, Judah is the one who thought of selling him into slavery. So later it tells the story about Judah and Tamar. So Judah now has sons of his own. And one of his sons, this comes really bizarre. Just raise your hand. I invented this symbol if I lose you, because I'm going to try and go long. His son is married to Tamar, but his son dies before conceiving a child. Now in Judaism, they have this thing that the widow, she can be impregnated by one of the sons, and that son is not the son of that father. It's the son of the husband that died. I know it sounds kind of strange, but that way his name lives on, and she gets a child. But the problem is, Judah doesn't want to do that because he's afraid it would endanger the life of one of his other sons. So he's just going to let her have nothing. So Tamar, she keeps waiting and waiting, and he's not delivering on the promise. And that means the son will remain dead and she will never be a mother. And in Jewish law, she has the right to carry on that name. So, wow, Tamar does something shocking. Tamar dresses up as a prostitute and goes to the place that she goes to is this place in the road called, quote unquote, this is kind of key. I love the Hebrew trickster. Quote unquote, the opening of the two eyes. It can also be translated the place of the two springs. But it's a word play because she's dressed as a prostitute. So she would have had a veil over her, and the only thing you can see is her eyes. So the only thing you can see is her eyes, the place of the two eyes, but there's also two springs there. That's why it's called the place of the springs. And she's the one who sees the whole truth behind Judah's lies and manipulation. And so the name of it is the opening of the eyes, but there's a third meaning. It's Tamar's eyes who are open, but it's Judah's eyes that will be open to justice. So she dresses up as a prostitute, and the interesting thing is that she's referred to in the story only in pronouns because, or Judah speaks of her that way, because Judah can't see her humanity. All he sees is a prostitute, not a woman. He sees no justice, and so he sleeps with her, gets her pregnant. But he doesn't, and she planned this out well. Remember, women are tricksters in the Bible. He doesn't have... What's that? She did it to make sure he had nothing to give her. And he promised her a goat. Once again, it's a goat. And once again, it's clothing. The clothing is her veil dressed up as a prostitute. Do you get it? And the goat again. Holy cow. You deceived your father. Now Judah is getting deceived by the very same things. And so because he doesn't have anything, she asked for really his credit card. So they had these things that you could press that would be your seal, and a ring and a staff. And she says, oh, I'll give him back once I get my goat. So he says, no problem. So goes and wants to pay her a goat, but he has to tell people, where's the prostitute that hangs out at the corner? And they said, there's no prostitute here. Okay, that makes no sense. So later he finds out that Tamar is pregnant, which means she's fornicated. And Judah, because he's so religious, demands that she's burned at the stake. Sounds reasonable. Yeah, he did it, but big deal. Now, this is before the Ten Commandments, when really adultery had a different code later. But it was still wrong of women to commit fornication, not for men. I don't know where that rule comes from. You get the injustice, right? Okay. But I do love it. So just also, you have to know in this story, Tamar is a great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of Jesus. Jesus' genealogy mentions 5 women, and all 5 women did something scandalous. In one sense, Tamar did break the law as a prostitute. But in another sense, she kept the law. That was her right to have a child. And she was a Gentile, a Canaanite woman. So, wow, Jesus comes from a line where he has Canaanite. And Judah tricked his father with clothing in a goat, and now he's tricked. So you have this same thing. Jacob, Joseph, Tamar, and Judah now is tricked using a goat. But now he's fooled by the same things. So now imagine, she's supposed to be burned at the stake. She's brought forward, and Tamar says, "Oh, can I talk to you in private?" And he says, yes. She pulls out the harlot's clothing and his seal, his credit card, and she says, "Recognize these?" And I know that sounds kind of strange because those are Judah's same words to his father when he shows, "Oh, this is what we found." So wait, goat, clothing, same wording of deception he gave to his father about Joseph's clothing, saying, "Recognize these?" Holy cow, Tamar does the same thing. Anyhow, what goes around comes around. And this is the shocking part. Judah, he hasn't been a good character so far. But once he sees that, he publicly announces, "She is righteous, I am not." So this is the story of Judah's conversion really deepening. That after this, Judah starts to correct the deceit of his family. Like Judah is caught. Does that make sense? So now Judah could have lied. Think of this. He could have lied and saved his own life. But the first time, he publicly admits his guilt and chooses honesty. After that, Judah will become a little bit better and better and better. So if you're wondering, Judah's cloak and staff, they are a sign of Christ, of the line of Judah. Cloak, staff, and ring. So you have to think, well, why was this story inserted in the middle of the Joseph story? Because the next time Joseph meets Judah, he's not the same guy. He's been called up on his lies. Does that make sense? By a woman. Now back to the Joseph story. Joseph, his life keeps getting worse. He's put into a pit, right? Now that phrase pit will keep coming up over and over again in the Bible. So he goes, in the Hebrew, he goes down to the pit by his brothers. Then he goes down to Egypt. Then he goes down to Potiphar's house. And then again, Joseph goes down to the prison. And the prison he calls, quote unquote, the pit. So in the Jesus story, at one point he will go down to the pit. So he's going down, down, down. But back to Potiphar's house, he does put himself, he's very competent, very handsome. The Bible says he's very handsome. But he's put in charge of Potiphar's house. And once again, the Bible has a lot of meal codes. Joseph is given authority over all things in the house except control of the food. Food has a big theme, so no food. But the word for food in Hebrew, the word for food and sex are actually really, really similar. So in the Bible, like in the book of Proverbs, it says, that the adulterous person eats food, wipes their mouth, and says, I have done no wrong. It doesn't make any sense unless you know, oh, adultery, food and sex are similar words. So there's these meal codes, and the meal codes are Egyptians and Hebrews cannot eat together. And if you notice the Bible, Jews are not supposed to eat with us Gentiles. Egyptians wouldn't eat with him. So he's not put in charge of the food. Now, the irony is, he is going to be put in charge of all the food of Egypt eventually. But he's super competent. But no food and means no touching his wife. But Potiphar's wife is super manipulative. She also is very tricky. But she uses her trickiness for evil. And she tries to seduce Joseph. And I do like this. Joseph refuses, and he says, how can I sin against God? Now, he didn't say, I can't sin against Potiphar, right? He said, I can't sin against God. In Joseph's theology, if I sin against another person, I'm really sinning against God. So this is before the Ten Commandments. So that means Joseph's moral code is really high. Does that make sense? He considers any sin against somebody else a sin against God. Well, she's ticked off at that. So now just think how clever, manipulative she is. Because she says different things to different people. To Potiphar, she says, quote unquote, he got away. Really meaning he got away from her. She skips the part that she tried to entrap him. And then she changes the words when she's speaking to the slave women in the house, saying, that Hebrew man, when he's speaking to the female servants, the same way he tried to rape me, he's going to end up trying to rape you. She's getting everybody against Joseph. But to her husband, she doesn't say that man, she says that Hebrew slave. Because remember, he's a master, he's a slave. So she's yanking his chain, that he did that to insult your status. Now, Potiphar was a eunuch. I know that sounds kind of strange, but in the Egyptian courts, eunuchs could get married, and they would adopt children. So the point is, she's very clever in using her social status to really gain sympathy and really sabotage Joseph. So Joseph goes down even further than a slave in Potiphar's house. He's in prison. But once again, Joseph is super competent because it says, like some translation will say that Joseph was put in charge over the prisoners and the work, but that rendering is a little inaccurate. The original Hebrew says something more. It says, quote, and the ruler of the dungeon gave into Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the dungeon, and that all they did there, he was the doer of it. Now, you could mean that he was in charge of all the work, but literally what it says is whatever work was done, Joseph is the one who caused it. So this sounds kind of strange, but the rabbis believe that Joseph's story said something about the coming Christ, that Joseph is this prefigurement of Christ, that whatever work we do imprisoned in this world is really the Christ who's in charge of it all. But notice you have this pattern of going down, down, down. And in his suffering, in imprisonment, after that, he's going to start rising up and up and up. And it starts again once with dreams. Joseph is the dreamer in the Bible. And he can interpret the people's dreams. Oh, yes. Jesus, well, right. Jesus is directing all the work. The same way Joseph gets credit for all the work done in the prison. It's not like he did all the work, but he was the doer of it in the sense that he was directing it all. Same thing with us. Like, you can think, oh my gosh, I've done so much work. Really, it's Christ directing the work through you. Does that make sense? Okay, so Once again, the dreams. Two of the prisoners have dreams, and they can't interpret it. Joseph can. And Joseph interprets their dreams. One means the guy's going to die. The other way means he's going to be forgiven and brought back to Pharaoh. So later, that works out to him because Pharaoh has this dream that nobody can interpret. And then the guy says, oh, I know somebody in prison who can, he remembered Joseph. He says, oh, he can interpret your dreams. Now, that's really interesting. Why, think about this, why does dreams, at the beginning of the story, get Joseph in trouble? And in the middle of the story, it's Joseph's dream that gets him out of trouble and succeed. What's the one key difference between him as an interpreter of dreams? He gets into trouble when he listens only to his own dreams. He becomes successful when he listens to the dreams of others. As a teenager, Joseph, yes, he is blessed with dreams, but he only interprets them about himself and creates chaos. It's only when he's concerned with other people's dreams that he rises. So he does rise because he can answer Pharaoh's dream. Joseph becomes this Egyptian courtier. He could have been a eunuch, but clearly raised to a new height. And he's given a new robe, a ring. Once again, symbols. You get how it keeps repeating the symbols? A robe, a ring, a new name, and he's given Egyptian wives. So this sounds kind of strange. Could a slave actually become a lord of Egypt? Shockingly, actually, it is historically correct. It sounds strange, but I guess in archaeology, it was that Joseph, it was known that it could happen. So Joseph shaves his head like an Egyptian, shaves his face, rather than have the Hebrew Jewish beards. And we have this Egyptian papyrus from the late 13th century that Canaanites did come down to Egypt because of drought. Actually, the whole world was in this horrible drought. And they went to the land of Goshen. So, wow, that's another archaeological fact that seems to be connect that, oh, this could be a true story. And in chapter 50, it describes the embalming of Joseph that actually was consistent with Egyptian practices, that the embalming took 70 days, which turned out to be accurate. We're told that Joseph lives 110 years. And we have more than 24 ancient texts from Egyptian sources that said the ideal Egyptian life was 110 years. So, I mean, I don't know if he really lived 110 years. I like to think he did. But what it really says is Joseph has become this ideal Egyptian. The ideal number of lives for a Hebrew is 120. How long did Moses live? 120. It's based on the number 12. So anyhow, and you know historically, there were these Semitic tribes that actually did conquer Egypt for a while and worshipped one god. So that comes in later with the book of Exodus. But why does the story of Joseph, you can ask, well, okay, this whole story is about Joseph, but the Jews are all related to Judah. That's, if you say Jew, it means a descendant of Judah. Joseph is a different brother. The Jews are not related to, from the line of Joseph. So when it describes how they got to Egypt, it's a great story that is there a way that God can speak to us? And this is going to be the point. Can God speak to us without ever using words? Because Joseph says that it's not he who interprets the dream, but God who gave him the ability to interpret the dreams. Yet you never really hear God speak in the Joseph story. So if we're Joseph, How is God speaking to us without ever speaking to us? When we hear God speaking to us, when we interpret not our dreams, but examine our lives in relationship to other people. It's through examining his life and how it applies to Pharaoh's dream that he's able to interpret it. Now, the interpretation of Pharaoh's dream is, to me, so amazing. Why couldn't anybody else interpret Pharaoh's dreams? It only could have been Joseph who could interpret it, because all the symbols of his dreams relate to Joseph's family story. You would have had to know the Bible. The Egyptians wouldn't have. Now, I want to pause here because the dream, this whole part is where Joseph he goes down, down, down. Now he starts to go up and up and up. And in the Bible is filled with what's called chiastic structures. So I saw this shirt once that says a heart, and it said chiastic, and I loved it. Because I love chiastic structures. And you think, what the heck is a chiastic structure? That guy's crazy. That Italian up there talking makes no sense. A chiastic structure is like a pyramid. And this sounds kind of strange. A lot of the chapters in the Bible, books in the Bible, are written in a chiastic structure. So imagine we have a pyramid here, like the Gospel of John is as well. The Gospel of John. If Jesus heals a blind man on this side of the mountain, think of structure, guess what he does on this side of the mountain? If Jesus feeds a bunch of people on this side of the mountain, guess what happens on this side of the mountain? There's two of everything. Does that make sense? But then the most important part, there's only one. So Joseph's story is written in a chiastic structure. There's all these parallels on each side of the mountain. The dream part, the interpret of the dream, is the pinnacle. So I just love the whole dream thing. So think about this. In Joseph and the Pharaoh story, Pharaoh is the father figure who had a dream and told it to Joseph. In Joseph and Jacob, 13 years ago, Jacob, his father, didn't want to hear anything about dreams. But now his new father, Pharaoh, wants to hear about dreams. It's the reverse. Pharaoh is very interested in dreams. His own biological father was not. In Hebrew, when Pharaoh tells Joseph the dream, the language technically says, a dream I dreamt. You know what the language is 13 years before when Joseph speaks to Jacob? He says, I dreamt a dream. The same wording, except in reverse. So when Joseph is asked to interpret the dream, he's ready to see this kind of further deja vu pattern that's embedded in it. Does that make sense? All these things on each side, okay, I've heard this story before. So Pharaoh retells his dream to Joseph. The events that took place mirror the exact same things that happened 13 years back when he told the dream that got him put in the pit. The events that are taking place now are the reverse of, in chronological order, of what happened in the other side. So there's a lot of this Hebrew wordplay that doesn't appear in English. So think about the Bible. The wordplay is this: Leah, cow, slender, brother, cows, shepherding together. So when Pharaoh tells his dream, oh my God, that's the same thing that happened 13 years ago. That's the same thing that happened, Leah, his father, the 7 years. Jacob had to work 7 years. So looking at his own history, Joseph's dream can only be interpreted for somebody who knew Jacob had worked 2 sets of 7 for the 2 wives. One of them was Leah. That the dream he's telling me, Pharaoh's dream that he's telling me, is really about my life and my family's life. So Joseph, when he interprets a dream, he interprets it using things that happened from his life and his father's life. Pharaoh's dream wouldn't have made any sense to any of the Egyptians because they weren't of Joseph's family. So he gets it. The 7 cows are 7 years, 7 good years. The 7 skinny cows are 7 years of drought. Not only does he understand Pharaoh's dream, but he also now understands what he has to do based on the dreams he had when he was a kid. Does that make any sense? That's why the Egyptians couldn't interpret it. They didn't know Joseph's family story, the Bible. It also explains what his dream meant when he was a kid. Now remember, the Egyptians are farmers. The Hebrews are ranchers. So Joseph now knows what the dream he had as a kid meant, that the brothers will come to him during the drought and ask for food. When his brothers come, he'll send them back the food. So Joseph, he is put in charge of all of Egypt. Put in charge of Egypt. He's the right hand of Pharaoh. And he starts this campaign of, during the 7 great years, saving as much food as possible. Now, this is what's going to catapult Egypt to be a world power, because the rest of the world will come begging for food. Does that make sense? So Joseph is super competent. He's put in charge. But the most important part is that he knows his brothers will come begging for food. So finally he reveals himself. I'll get to that in a second, but I love that line where he says, "I am Joseph, your brother." And he'll say, "God did all this so that I can save you." He knows that really it's God who's the doer of all deeds. God spoke to him without ever speaking to him. And his reaction is great. You know, at the very end of the story, I'm jumping to the end, when he says, "I am Joseph, your brother." And they're sorry. He says, No, it was good that I was sold into slavery. It was great because I was sold into slavery, and now I can save my family and the entire world. I can feed the world because you betrayed me. And this sounds kind of strange. Remember, he goes to Shechem, and the stranger says, "Oh, they're not here. They went further on." Even that stranger he met 13 years ago needed to be in the right place at the right time to get him to meet his brothers. Joseph is saying, oh, this has all been guided by God. God is the doer of all this, not Joseph. Every little thing worked out to save the family. And I like that, because have you ever thought that God is just tapping you on the shoulder? And I like the Joseph story because it's not for me to know how everything's going to work out. All I have to know is God will make everything work out. I just have to be very attentive to the tap on the shoulder, how God's going to speak to me through events, not say, "Okay, Leonard, turn left." Well, today I'm Italian. Giuseppe, turn left. So going back to this, you get the contrast. Who is Joseph's real father? So go back to being in prison. Who is Joseph's real father? Because Jacob scolded his son for the dream. He was angry with him and then sent him to Shechem to go check on his brothers. Shechem, of all places. What just happened in Shechem lately when his father says, "Go check on your brothers"? His brothers had just undertaken this commando raid to rescue their sister Dinah, who had been raped and taken away. So they misuse religion to say, "Oh yeah, you can marry our sister, but first you have to be circumcised." And then when all the men are circumcised, they go in and they kill everybody in the village. And Jacob is horrified when he finds out. You used religion to kill people. And anyhow, it's kind of strange because there's this line back where it says, where one of the brothers says, "Dinah wasn't daughter enough for you? They raped our sister. We are going to take revenge." So Shechem is a place that is soaked in blood by his brothers.
And if you're sitting in prison thinking, oh my God, the guy had me go to Shechem, where my brothers just committed genocide, and they're ticked off at me. The brothers were angry with me. They're angry at their sister's rape. They've just killed everybody. They're jealous of him. And his father says, well, why don't you go to your brothers in Shechem?
Like, wouldn't you, if you couldn't see the whole story, wouldn't you kind of think, oh my God, my father set me up for murder? And when Jacob says, go to Shechem, you know what his answer was? Joe's answer was, here I am. So once again, you notice every figure says, here I am. And here I am means you're going to die to your ego, but it also means you're going to sacrifice yourself. In this story, this sounds kind of strange. It keeps repeating, but when Joseph says, here I am, he really hasn't died to his ego, but he's about to die to his ego. He's going to start the process. And so wouldn't you kind of think, oh my gosh, I was set up. It's not like anybody else in his family hadn't been kicked out before. Remember, what Abraham did to Ishmael. So would have Joseph thought that he was thrown out, sent? And so in one sense, maybe his father and brothers put him there to die. And who's the one who pulls him out of prison? That's Pharaoh who pulls him out, gives him beautiful new clothing, just like his real father did, sets him up as second in charge. So from Joseph's perspective, his real father now is Pharaoh. Here's the man who took me out of the pit, where my biological father did give me a coat. My brother stripped it from me. My real father wasn't interested in my dreams, but now my Egyptian father really is. And he gives Joseph a new name, which means he's claiming him as a son. And he gives him two wives. And here's the thing. Pharaoh at this time, he's a good king. He's not an evil character that he will before. And look at the names that Joseph gives his two children. The first one is named, God has allowed me to forget my pain. The second one is, God has allowed me to be fruitful, admits my pain. So, I don't know this for sure, but if you read the story, don't you think, given the names of his kids, Joseph completely assimilates into Egyptian society? Don't you think Joseph would have thought he was completely betrayed? And so Joseph, when he's reconciled to his brothers, Joseph becomes both the son of Israel and the son of Pharaoh. He becomes both. And I like this because it shows that really divisions based on race or economics or politics, it really doesn't matter. The only real division that matters is whether somebody's moral or immoral. Viktor Frankl, his time in the concentration camp with the Nazis, he didn't really blame the Nazis, but what he said is there's two divisions of people in the world, the decent and the indecent. It's not written through who belongs to what religion, German versus Jews, Christians versus Jews. It's decent versus indecent. And in the end, Genesis, when it dies, Joseph says that when he dies, to take his bones back to the promised land, which sets up the book of Exodus. And I'll get to that in a sec. But back to the plot where his brothers come begging for food because there's this worldwide drought. And he's really tricky. He won't eat with the Hebrews. He won't eat with his brothers because Egyptians and Jews didn't do that. Egyptians especially did not eat with shepherds. But now, the Jews aren't racist in this because one can convert to Judaism. But they just don't mix. And it's obvious he knows the brothers if we read the story because Joseph seats the brothers in their birth order. So it's kind of like, really, brothers, you couldn't figure out that he kind of knew what was going on? And the word silver keeps repeating 20 times. Like, that's a little overuse. Why? Because Joseph was sold for silver. Does that make sense?
So like he's putting it right in their face. And then finally there's this confrontation between Joseph and Judah, which once again explain why you had that sandwich in the middle of the Judah story. So Joseph had placed a silver goblet in the sack of Benjamin, his actual brother he never didn't know, and the new favored child. And as the brothers are leaving the city, Joseph dispatches armed guards to track him down. Very similar to the Jacob story. And Judah says, "Search our belongings. We have nothing to hide. And if you find anything, the person who have found to take the king's goblet shall be put to death." Well, they found the goblet in Benjamin's sack. Now what is Judah going to say? Judah says, no, don't worry. I'm not going to kill this. Joseph says, now, don't worry. I'm not going to kill the thief, but he'll come back to Egypt as my slave. The rest of you can go. He's putting, do you get what's happening? Benjamin is going to have the same sentence as Joseph did. But don't worry, brothers. You'll be fine. He's putting him in that situation again. He's replaying it. And what do you think Judah does? Because the first time, Judah leads the way saying, "Oh, do you recognize these? It was your son. He must have died." So you kind of think, oh my gosh, the brothers are going to just act for themselves. But Judah has changed. And Judah promised his father that he would bring Benjamin back alive. That's one thing his father worried about. And so most of us would have maybe gone back and said, look, what are we supposed to do? It's true Benjamin was taken captive, but aren't you lucky you have us again? But Judah does something different. Judah makes this last-ditch effort to save Benjamin by any means possible. And he offers himself as a sacrifice. Judah gives this impassioned speech that really, it should bring you to tears, where he tells the whole painful story, how we've done this before. Admits to the whole thing. You don't understand. Our father has already lost a child of his beloved Rachel. My father's soul is bound up with Benjamin's soul. If you take Benjamin from us, he'll die. Please, take me instead. I'll be your servant. There was a time when Judah would have really allowed his brother, the child of Rachel especially, to be sold into slavery because Judah didn't feel like he was loved enough. Now he doesn't care how much he's loved. He cares how much he loves his father. Now Judah says, I know my father loved Rachel more than my mother. I know he loves Benjamin more than me. I know his soul is bound up with Benjamin. But take me. Let Benjamin return to my father. It's really Judah's finest moment. So Judah is now the very opposite of the man who sold his brother away. And when it's a great speech. And when Joseph hears it, he starts to cry. And he realizes, they've had this change. But let me ask you this before we move on. Where else in the Bible have you heard this exact phrase, that one person's soul is bound up in another person's soul? Because it keeps repeating. The Bible just keeps repeating the symbols, right? It's going to happen next with Saul and David. Same language. Now, if you don't know, David is from the tribe of Judah. Saul is from the tribe of Benjamin. So one more time, you have this mirroring. Sorry, did you get that? I just want to make that point that, wow, you kind of think you're reading a different story. God keeps using the same symbols, just slightly different. And so Joseph is so taken with his speech, he starts to cry and gives it away and says, I am Joseph, your brother. It's just a great ending. Now, John the 23rd, when he met the Jewish leaders in Rome, And due to the previous persecution of the Jews, when he meets with the Jewish leaders, he says the same line, I am Joseph, your brother. I love that. I am your brother. The brothers don't recognize their brother, but Joseph can recognize who is his brothers. This is the reverse of the Cain and Abel story. Am I my brother's keeper? Well, actually, yes, Joseph is. He was their shepherd. He was the one who fed them. And you could really say this is a story. The Joseph story is a story of Christ. Christ is the one who tries to teach us that we're brothers and sisters, that we just don't recognize each other as brothers and sisters. That's what the Good Samaritan story is. That the victim he looked on as his brother. So Joseph is kind of this shadow story of Christ. Both were despised and rejected by their brothers. Both were separated from their families. Both were exiled to a foreign land. Both were falsely accused. Both were in prison. Both suffer for the sins of others, that are raised up and exalted to a royal position to feed the entire world. This time to feed the world with his body and blood, the Eucharist. But estranged from his family, Joseph is the hope of his family without even realizing. His family doesn't realize Joseph is their one hope. His brothers have no idea that the Savior of Egypt is also their long-rejected brother. They go down to Egypt and stand face to face to Joseph with no idea that the Savior of Egypt is also their long-rejected brother. They couldn't see past the Egyptian clothing and adornments. All they could see is a foreigner. So think about this. In my opinion, for 2,000 years, God came to save the family. Christ came to save the family, to feed the world, to save people of every race, language, and way of life. Yet, Christ is still not recognized by his own family. Yet, in the end, the Bible says his brothers, the Jews, will see him face to face. So you have this kind of story of the mask of the Egyptian. Joseph would have been dressed up as an Egyptian royal official, and they couldn't see past the Egyptian clothing and language. All they could see is a Gentile, the Lord of Egypt. So for the last 2,000 years, Christ has been the Savior, but estranged from his own family. For Jews, and I like Jews, but Jesus is the Savior of the Gentiles. But we believe in the end, he will also save the Jews. So then you have the death of Israel, his father. And there's this kind of, always in the Bible, deathbed blessing. They all give it. Even Jesus does at the Last Supper, give his deathbed blessing. And he curses some of the sons. Like his oldest son slept with his father's concubine. So Simon and Levi, they are cursed for misusing religion. But the shocking part is Judah gets the blessing. That from Judah, and this is the shocking part, not Joseph, but from Judah gets the blessing that his descendants will rule. That it's called the Lion, read it, it's very poetic. The Lion of Judah. Actually, all the brothers are compared to a type of animal, and the lion was the king of the animals. Judah gets called the Lion of Judah. Judah is blessed, and so the descendants of Judah, the Jews, will come the great Lion of Judah, the King of Kings. It's going to be Christ. But he blesses and curses Judah with the very same language. It's very tricky because he says, on the prey of my son you have gone up, the staff between your legs. Well, that means his descendants will rule, but he's also making this harken back to the sin he had with Tamar. So this sounds kind of strange. The Hebrew blessings work a lot like Irish blessings. Irish blessings are actually curses, and Irish curses are actually blessings. Do you want me to explain that real quick? Okay, so
So the language is really important. It's both in Hebrew. But like, there's this poet, this Irish woman. She was a poet, I think she lived in Boston, who grew up with an alcoholic, abusive father who used to just smack the living hell out of her and especially her brother. And the mother tried to divorce her husband just to save the children, and the judge in Boston wouldn't allow the divorce, that women's place are in the home. So the daughter writes this Irish poem, blessing, to the judge. May you be healed of all your wounds, so the next day some drunk can beat you up too. May no, like, it starts out as a blessing, but then it's really a curse. Does that make sense? May you wake up the next morning in a relationship that, that's kind of like his blessing to his sons. It's both a blessing and a curse. And the shocking part is that he does bless Judah, even though Judah's not the firstborn, he gets a firstborn blessing. But he also blesses Joseph. He blesses Joseph with abundance. But the true king will come from the line of Judah. So I do love the fact that in Judaism, they write about people's sins as well as their holy. Does that make sense? I like that in Judaism, that there's this holy kind of, we're not going to pull punches. But remember, the beginning of Genesis was about the seed of the woman, the snake crusher. You want the blessing because from that line will come the snake crusher. And now we know it's not going to come through Joseph, and you think it would be because he's super competent. It's going to come through Judah. That's really odd. Judah's not the firstborn, but he gets a firstborn blessing. And the twist there is God never works according to what you think. You think Joseph, he's so great, he's going to get the blessing. But it's Judah, who's not the firstborn. The Lion of Judah, the most powerful king, will come from somebody who really was not the best, Judah. But at least he could admit his sins. Judah was willing to sacrifice himself for his brother. So the Lion of Judah, later in the book of Isaiah, says that the Lion of Judah, the most powerful king to come, will also be a servant who will be abused and disfigured. And this servant will take away the power of the snake, where the child can play with the serpent and not be harmed. Think serpent from the book of Genesis, that we'll be so innocent, Satan can't hurt us. But this abused servant king, the Lion of Judah, nobody would guess as the one who will bring back the way to the Garden of Eden. Just as the powerful king goes down to the pit, like Joseph, and will feed the world. Just as many are appalled that the Jews who had no lands, who were the lowest slaves, appalled that the great king will come from the lowest people. And the kings of the earth, it says in Isaiah, the kings of the earth, I like this, will be left with their mouths shut. And what that means is that the kings and the powerful, they're going to be really shocked what real power looks like. The Lion of Judah is somebody who is willing to be bruised and broken and a servant to others. They'll be left speechless before God because God always works in this upside-down way, that the most political and powerful would have never thought that the way God is going to turn things around and win is by suffering. The Lion of Judah is the abused king who will purify all people. And so the point being is that, wow, if you look in the book of Genesis, God does save his people, but always through upside-down ways. And after that, it says that Isaac bowed his head before he died. Why does he bow his head at the last moment? He bows his head because he gets a vision of the future, that Joseph was great and in this wonderful power in Egypt. But according to the Midrash, Israel realized that Joseph was, in Hebrew it's called a righteous one.
So he's close to his death. And he calls Joseph and he says, please, I have a request. Bury me, don't bury me in Egypt. Bury me with my fathers. And Joseph responds that he will. Now, if you were Israel, what would you say next? If I was Israel, I would say, thank you very much, but that's not what he says. Israel says, swear to me that you will do it. What does he mean, swear to me that you'll do it? How would Pharaoh feel about a state funeral for a royal Egyptian in the land of Canaan? That's not Egyptian territory. Who is Israel? Israel was the father of the man who saved the entire world, the royal hero Joseph. But Joseph is Egyptian royalty when he dies. So Israel is embalmed like an Egyptian royalty. Israel's funeral, and this is odd because he's a Hebrew, he has an Egyptian funeral. And the Torah says the strangest thing in the world, that an Egyptian state funeral happens outside of Egypt in the land of Canaan. And then it says, and I just want to mention this, the text says that Israel buried, and in the eulogized place that it has a strange name in Hebrew, which literally translates crown of thorns. It was a crown of thorns, a circle of thorns around the coffin. This is the second time in the book of Genesis we've heard the phrase crown of thorns. First time is when Isaac dies. It's a ram that has his head caught in the thorns, except this time it's an image of all these patriarchs and Roman officials around his grave. So you know that crown of thorns is going to keep repeating until it gets to Christ. But the end of Genesis ends with forgiveness. Now, there's a sad story. After Israel dies, the brothers get together and says, well, okay, Joseph forgave us, but now that the old man died, maybe he's harbored some hatred in his heart. And so they go to Joseph and say, have you really forgiven me? And it's really this passion scene. When they ask him that, Joseph starts to cry. And he says, I don't play God. I don't decide what's right and what's wrong. God showed me the way of forgiveness. So this is the reverse of Adam and Eve, who decided to play God and decide what is good and what is not. Joseph is the opposite. He doesn't decide what's good or bad. God asked him to forgive. He forgave. He's the opposite of Cain and Abel in practicing forgiveness. And so, gives this great speech. When I forgive, I forgive. I don't decide on what's good or evil. It's a great speech. So the family of Abraham is supposed to, if you remember, invite all people into the family of God by practicing forgiveness. Joseph fixed what was broken in his brothers not by punishing them, but by offering them forgiveness. If we want people to come back to our church as Catholics, throwing legalism that, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm going off on my own now. But no, shouldn't we be like Joseph? It really upsets me when I hear priests say, oh, you shouldn't be here because you are married outside the church. Shouldn't we practice forgiveness? That's how we bring back the family of God. The same way Abraham's family was supposed to make my house full for my meal. Just indicting people doesn't do it. Forgiveness does. And the really odd part is there's no picture of God in the Joseph story. God is mentioned at the beginning of Genesis. God speaks. But if you notice in the beginning of Genesis, God's presence falls more and more and more back as the book of Genesis goes on, more into the background. God speaks to Jacob only once, and then in dreams. God only speaks to Joseph in dreams. God is just working in the background, yet God is the doer of it all. In the Joseph story, God is never even given an image except for monotheism. Now, the Exodus story will change that, but the best that we know God is sometimes by God turning our mistakes into blessing. But God still speaks to us. In fact, one of the ancient terms for God in Hebrew is, quote unquote, God of our dreams. in the last words that happen in the book of Genesis, and I love this, Joseph dies and is mummified, and the last word is he's mummified, quote unquote, in Egypt. Because that picks up the next story, Exodus, which means out of Egypt. So don't you love it? Like the last phrase is in Egypt. The next book is out of Egypt. So could I mention one more thing? Because I know I've gone. You also have this theme of dying, that if you notice, like Joseph is obnoxious, and he dies and he becomes a holy man. Jacob is obnoxious. And who Judah was, he was a horrible person. And then with the Tamar story, he dies and he starts to become a holy person. So you always have this idea of going down to get up. You want to become a holy person? Go down. Or in our words, learn to die. And I love, like, even in the book of Job who's lost everything. Job is holy at the beginning of the story. In the end of the story, he's even more holy. And when things are worse for Job says this great line where he says, even if God kills me, I will trust in God. God, if you notice, kills a lot of people in the Old Testament, or at least by kill, I mean a type of death, but they come out holier and able to love. So Abraham has a death. Isaac has a death. Jacob, Joseph, even Job. And I think it prefigures the cross when it says Christ died for our sins, not because he needed to. He's showing us how to die to selfishness and, how to die to ego and all that other stuff. So after, like, dying and going down, they're able to love more completely. And really, is there any love without suffering? The great rabbis teach in the Old Testament about the sufferings of love, quote unquote. I love that. You can love a child. They'd say, can you love a child and not suffer? And to be fair, to love a parent also brings some suffering as well. Even the best marriages have suffering in it. So, quote, love is a suffering that makes you happy and the happiness that makes you suffer. To get to love like Abraham, Isaac, and Joseph, it is going to involve some death. So, sorry, I went a little long, 5 minutes over, but we did start a little late. So, any questions? Yes, purple, pink. Oh, that's sweet. Okay, so now we're going to have a little class on small faith communities, on how and what, but do this. Like, I really think the backbone of a parish should be small faith communities, but I beg you this. We want to fall in love with each other. And so we made this rule in my former parish, and I want you to follow this. No talking politics in small faith. No, people get impassioned and angry, and like politics will go the way of dirt and dust. It will fade away. I have strong political opinions, but, don't talk politics in small faith community. All it does, the nation is already geared up with enough anger. So I hope we can fall in love and have small faith communities, but God forbid, don't talk politics. So now I'd like to invite my fellow Italians. Do you want the microphone? Yeah.
Good morning. Mary's going to get the handheld. So we'll start right into this, but take a break if you need to, and or refresh your refreshments. This is just a very practical, the how-to, some of the follow-up from the retreat that a lot of folks have been asking for, quite frankly. So I'll let Mary kick it off.
Yeah. But first of all, I wanted to let you know this is being recorded, so if you have to leave, don't worry. We also have created a special small faith community page on our website. So Chris is going to go around and hand you some handouts, I believe. And the website is listed there. So feel free to get handouts and lots of other stuff on the website if you can't stay. All righty. I will get started. Yes. We will ask you to hold questions till the end, just because we're going to give you so much information, we may answer your question. But we will take questions at the end, no problem. If you were at the retreat, you received a reflection book like this. We're going to refer to it. You don't need it. If you were at the retreat, you're just fine. You already heard this information. I'm only going to touch on it, but Chris can hand those out too. They're over there. If you weren't at the retreat. And the other thing on your way out, on the back table, are ministry books. Father mentioned that last week. So this is our current ministries. You could take that on your way out as well. And there's a couple other things that were at the retreat, and I'm only going to quickly mention, but we handed out these little puzzle pieces as part of a icebreaker, which was really fun, by the way. But it had a real significance. So I'm going to invite you on your way out to take a puzzle piece and a little poem that goes with it. And it really brings home the idea that we are all pieces of this greater puzzle, the body of Christ. We're not alone. And that really ties beautifully into the goal of the small faith communities. God created us to live in community with others. So why should we even be interested in starting or participating in a small group? We're just going to go through this little handout. But small faith communities are a place to connect with others, share life, and grow faith. So we're all a piece of the puzzle of our greater parish and our greater Catholic and faith community. And it's a place for protection where our problems become smaller because we're sharing them with others. And it's a place to grow in our faith. So that's a lot of the why, and I'm not going to go further into that at this point. But please take a puzzle piece and the little poem. It's just a beautiful way to bring that home. And Chris is going to move on to some of our nuts and bolts on how to recruit.
Don't want to mess up Father's microphone here, so I'll hold it. Yeah, let's do that. All right. So as Mary said, so the retreat basically was a call to community, right? It was a call, we called it a pilgrimage towards unity. It was this idea to enter more deeply into community. That was the whole point of it all. We wanted that to bridge into an ongoing commitment on behalf of everybody into the community, so we recommended their spiritual friendships, the idea of just having coffee with a friend, a couple of friends, but in a focused way that intentionally enters you more deeply into a faith conversation. So spiritual friendships or small faith communities, a little bit larger group, again, focused on deepening our faith together. So one of the quick and easy ways maybe to do that, and there's a Welcome to St. Pius. There's a little ministry handout on the back of in the back of the church. And all the ministries and prayer groups that currently exist are in there, including contact. Well, there you go. So one of the quick and easy ways would be to just take a hold of one of those ministry guidelines. It's also posted on that new website. And go through it and look at the ministries. Look at the leaders of those ministries, what those ministries are committed to, and see if there's some people to connect with there, and or the existing prayer groups that are listed, our Benedictine group, etc. It lists when they meet. And so it's an easy entree into a small faith community. If you're participating in a ministry, again, it's maybe just tweaking that ministry a little bit or picking some of those people in that ministry to meet offline from the ministry and have a prayer group. You know, our soup kitchen does a really good job of this. They pray their way into their ministry for the afternoon and then pray their way out of the ministry. And then they leave the prayer open while they're serving the poor their meal because it's all a prayer, right? So they've taken that ministry and really it's a spiritual, it's a call to holiness, it's a spirituality that's lived out in the ministry. So even just taking a look at the existing prayer groups, the existing ministries, thinking about the ministries that you're already involved in and making those your small faith communities. But again, the difference is to make it intentional, right? To have a format, a clear and way to enter into prayer with each other, whether that's reading the weekly Gospels or whatnot.
Okay, the next point on how to recruit for a small group or participate in one, or actually consider your own. But how do I begin? Where do I begin? Consider your own interests, your own desires. Ask yourself some questions. Am I a newcomer to the parish and would like to meet other newcomers? We've been blessed by someone who said, yes, I want to start that. So Beth, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, she would like to start a small group for newcomers. So after here, we can just meet her over at the back table and she'll chat with you. Yes, thank you, Beth. Another question might be, am I a single 65 and over person and want to meet others in the parish for some social time? Is Marie here? There, right in front of me. Marie is interested in starting a small group to that effect. I think that's beautiful. So again, you can just visit with Marie after our little talk today and get more information and maybe start something together. But those are the kinds of things. Ask yourself a question like, am I an empty nester looking to meet other empty nesters? Excuse me. Am I someone who likes to be in God's creation, hiking, walking? Am I a young family? Or are my kids, are they parts of young families that we can encourage them to get together with other young families? So just think about that. That's a way that you can start your own small group. If you want to recruit other members, after you have an idea, you can send that idea to the office. Excuse me, and we'll publish it in the bulletin, put it on that website page, and then you can get your interest from there. We're going to really let you develop these on your own. I think that's just part of the big puzzle that'll be beautiful.
Yeah, so those puzzle pieces become important. As Mary says, we'll carry that icon, that image forward into the bulletin, and hopefully share the groups that are starting, share the good news, things that are happening well, best case scenarios, kinds of things. But it'll all be organized under that image. So if you watch for that image, it'll help you kind of track small faith communities. So in the end of this first section we were talking about how to get started is just the idea of invitation. Just invite. Have a little bit of that courage or whatever, and just reaching out and asking somebody. There's Exploring Catholicism. If you ended up at the table every week with the same people, see if that can morph into something a little bit more, or just over coffee and donuts at the parish after Mass, or other places where common interests are found, right? Just make it an invitation to others to enter into some sort of community. Start small and let it have life from there. So Mary's going to cover a little bit of how to get started.
So now, again, getting more into the weeds, how do we get started? What do we do? So once you have a list of some potential people, invite one or two others to join you as co-pilots. This will help sustain your group because it's really difficult to have a group and then you're on vacation or you get sick. Have some others to help you. You can have some co-pilots. Consider getting started during Lent. This way we're just right off to the races. It gives you a focused goal and a beautiful way to start your Lenten journey. One idea that we threw out at the retreat, and I encourage you, is to attend Ash Wednesday Mass together. So that's your official springboard and takeoff. And then decide how often you want to meet from there. And this is where the Lenten suggestions come in. And that was on page 9 in your book of the Lenten suggestions. I'm only going to very briefly go over that because those of you who are at the retreat heard a little more. But we're giving 5 suggestions, a lot of different formats, whether it's videos or a reflection book or a book with a study guide or an e-version that you can email your group and have them so that they have that always like on their phone if people like an electronic. So there's 5 different that we're suggesting. By all means, we're not saying it's limited to that. These are only suggestions for you to consider just to help you get started. I have samples of them, of each of the 5 on the back table there. Take a look, but please leave them there so others can take a look at them. And so number 1 and number 2 and number 4, you just order yourself. Most of them are on Amazon. It gives you the information in the book. And again, if you need a reflection book, we'll hand that to you. Number 3, the one that's number 3, that's a PDF. So we're going to need your contact information. There's a sign up on the back table with that. Just give me your name and your email address, and we'll send you the PDF. And then you'll take it from there as a leader. Number 5 is a daily meditation book. I have available 50 copies that the parish purchased. If you're going to want to use that resource, I can either, if you know the number in your group, I can give them to you today or write your name down and I'll contact you. But again, I only have about 50 of those. Okay. And then I think Chris is going to go over to...
This is our way of being Valentines. So, yes, so then you've got some materials, you've got an idea of where to pick up some names, contact some people, come together, some content to perhaps use. We'll talk about that in a little bit more, but there's that, there's that thing that kind of keeps you from getting started, right? So just start making some decisions. First, I love the idea of co-pilots. Find a partner in crime where you both feel like maybe you can't do it, but together you feel like you can. So find that co-pilot. And then decide together when you will meet, right? So do we just make it a weekday or in the evening or right after Mass? That happens a lot where you just dovetail it into something else right after Exploring Catholicism. Just pick a time and pick a meeting place. Is it going to be out in the community, in a coffee shop? Here at the parish, you can always call the office and begin reserving time in so many little spaces that we have throughout the parish. Pick a start and an end time for your prayer group, right? Keep it defined because it's hard for people to commit to open-ended things, right? So you keep your structured time or your prayer group time kind of focused, then you can always take time on either side to socialize and others. But in terms of leading, just pray for the graces to lead, right? To do that invitation, to gather people together and to kick off this prayer time together. God will step up. He will give you the graces you need. You should never hold back because of that. We hear that a lot. I'm unqualified. I can't, Just step forward in faith, and the Lord will take care of you in that way. And then pray for yourself and pray for the other members of the group. So really it becomes that easy. The one decision you'll make is it a structured gathering or unstructured? And we heard the other term was free market, I think was the term Kathy and had come up with at one point, Kathy and Scott. But is it a free market group, kind of an open-ended, or is it very structured? We have Teams of Our Lady in the parish, which Susan and Tamarack left, but they're part of Teams of Our Lady, a very structured format for married couples. And then we have some that are wide open, right? Biking groups, etc. So structured versus unstructured. So Mary will give some examples of that.
If you prefer a structured format, and especially this might be useful if you're going to use one of the formats that's really for daily reflection but didn't really have questions, so you're kind of like, now what do I do with that? So this might be an example for you. Well, first off, in advance of your meeting, make sure all the members have what they need, whatever the reflection materials are. Set a prayerful and a welcoming environment. And just allow for some social time. Even if it's, if it's structured, you still want that fellowship and social time. You may want to start with an opening prayer. If you're thinking, oh my goodness, I wouldn't even know where to begin with an opening prayer, I put samples on that page, on that Small Faith Community page, some opening and closing prayers. And I'll keep updating that so you have resources. Make sure you allow, this is the most important, reflection and sharing time. If there aren't reflection questions in your materials or in that study guide, you might consider something like, what in this week's reading or prayer time particularly spoke to you? Why? How have I been Christ to others this week? What am I specifically feeling called to do in this coming week? So you can keep it as structured and kind of loose as that, and then have some social time. So that's an example and some ideas to help you get started.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the spectrum, I guess, on top of page 3 is kind of the idea of the non-structured, which what Mary has here is very similar to the fourth day I think I mentioned at the retreat that I do. We talk about really 3 things in there, and we talk about what we did for study and formation during the week, and then where was I Christ to others, and where did I experience Christ? And so the first 2 are kind of what do you call it, but just following on up how we did during the week, accountability, if you will, study, formation, and where I was Christ to others. Then the third one really is a matter of gratitude and looking out at the world and seeing God present to us and being thankful for that. But we keep those 3 very simple questions similar to the ones on here, and that's what we focus on. So again, usually we enter in friendship, have conversation, then we say, okay, let's start. We do an opening prayer, we do our loosely knit structure, we do a closing prayer, and then we go back to socializing and leave. But it's a pretty unstructured format, which we've done here in the parish, out in coffee shops, and up on the mountain biking, so lots of different ways. So when facilitating a session, I'm moving on to the next bullets there on that page 3, ensuring hospitality. First and foremost, and I mentioned this to somebody the other day that did such a wonderful job cooking for the deanery meeting, actually, so it was Connie, whom many of you know. She did just such a wonderful job. Each and every person that came to this meeting in the parish last week, there was just such a feeling of us being grateful for them. It was the priests, deacons that meet periodically as a deanery. But just the way she presented things, the care she took, it's this idea of hospitality. It doesn't have to be fancy, but just welcome people to your small faith community and facilitate introductions and just know that you are there to be what it says next, a loving, listening presence to group members, being kind and encouraging. And then remind everybody that these are sacred places, right? That we come there and what's said there is kept secret, or kept to each other.
The next is gauging the dynamic of the group, and then here's some tips, and just kind of really facilitating such a meeting or a group. Just remain on schedule, especially, again, this is if you're facilitating, and if you have a co-pilot, kind of help each other be accountable to this. Remain on schedule, on topic. Allow all voices to be heard. That's so important. and you can gently guide people to if they're not talking, but they don't have to talk or either, but you provide that space. Discourage side conversations, or just wait till the side conversation is done, because it's really hard to try to all stay on the same track when there's a lot of conversations going on. Allow silence. This is so important, and I can't even tell you how important. And I've been part or led different groups, and it feels uncomfortable at first. It's like, I need to fill the space. I need to fill the space. But you don't need to fill the space. Let the Holy Spirit work in these people. And sometimes, I know I'm a ruminator. I call myself, I'm a ruminator. I have to just sit and think, and then I can speak. So allow that, I would say. Remind members that small groups are not a place for business, unapproved materials or speakers unless invited or encouraged. Controversial topics, that's what Father mentioned. We don't bring up politics and things that we just know are going to strike a chord. We keep that out. And gossip. We're not here to talk about this person or that person or things like that. We keep it on the up and up. So, like I said, to keep your group going, we're going to periodically update things on that page. So just this morning, there's a button right on the home page of the website that says Small Faith Communities, and you'll recognize the image because it's our image that we've used throughout the retreat. Click on that button and you'll get lots of things. You can either download them or view them there. So we will take questions unless
existing small faith communities want to invite people, like charismatic prayer, etc. The website.
Yes. So if your group wants to invite people, you can certainly put that out to us, and we'll get it in the bulletin in that Small Faith Community column, and put it on that page on the website if you like. If you're really encouraging a group, is that what you're saying? Yeah, or new members. But otherwise, you reach out to people here as well, like to an existing. Any questions?
Diane. No. So Diane asked if we want to know. We, I assume, meaning the parish, and how often they meet and stuff. No, so this is where parish gets into trouble, being too hierarchical and, in a sense, bureaucratic. And so as Father and we all kind of entered into this conversation, even about the retreat and beyond, it's really clear we want community to come alive from the grassroots up, right? And the last thing we want to do is stifle that or create a bottleneck for that. So while we do want to share good information, the good stories, the successes that come from it, so people are inspired, at the same time, we don't want to create it where, okay, tell us how you met and when you met and who's, because then that just becomes a stifling sort of influence. Does that make sense? So we're going to be cautious just about how much we do versus how much we just support. Marie. Yes. So Marie's asking if that basic contact information for the various ministries, even the new ones, we'll add it to the directory, or it'll be on the website.
We'll wait, we won't add it and update it constantly, but what we will do is have it on the website. These are new, these are new. So if you're looking, or if someone calls the office and says to us, I really want to be a part of that, but what's going on? We'll tell them to go to the website. Like for your group, we would put in there, we're taking new members for the 65 and over group. We'll have it in the bulletin and on the website. And then periodically, this will be updated. But it won't be like constant.
Stacy? Oh, that's a great question, the idea of indefinitely. It could be, right? I'd leave that up to the group to define their charter. In a sense, you know, the things that I've been involved with naturally sort of ebb and flow, and I may be the same in the same group, but it's taken on different formats over the years. So I would say you have to let it kind of live and breathe on its own indefinitely, not to put a sunset on it, but then at the same time you may want to focus on a study for a particular period of time, take a break, then do another study, and just kind of, yeah, let it live and breathe organically according to the needs of the members would be my best answer to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, you could start with the Lenten one and then say, where do I go from here? And that's a great question because I have a lot of other resources for after Lent, the ideas that I'll be posting on that website. You could look at that, or there's a myriad of other things that you might have found on your own. Another thing might be as a group just saying, you know what, why don't we keep reevaluating every year? That's another thing you could do. So that everybody feels like, oh, we're not stuck in this forever. We can keep, you know, making it organic. Yes.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so Glenn's talking about the Wednesday, right? Wednesday morning Bible study group, which has been going on now for several years. And as, 13 is what Charlene's saying. And they've got some wonderful studies that have moved through there. Yeah, it's been really successful. So Glenn, thanks for mentioning them.
Yeah, and that's especially where this will come in handy because we have like the Benedictine group that meets. That's a small community. If they're taking other people, call them and find out if you could join that because that's an existing group or charismatic prayer group. There's so many prayer groups that are currently existing that you might just want to jump on board with. I know our Seasons of Hope bereavement ministry, we meet like 4 and 6 week increments 4 times a year, but there's those gaps in between when we don't meet. They're going to have a little small faith community in between to keep their connection.
Great questions and points. Gwen?
Gwen, I'm going to give you this mic. If you don't mind.
Anyway, our group is going to be meeting here at church after the 10 a.m. Mass because of logistics of where we all live. So it's going to be meeting after the 10 a.m. Mass someplace here in this building. I have to find out where we can meet because I don't know. This place has a lot of little places here. So what we're going to be doing is what I did in my previous group back in the 90s. So we're going to be looking at the upcoming scriptural readings for the next Sunday. So we've got Ash Wednesday already coming up, February 22nd. So what we will be doing, I don't know if we're going to make it to get our group together this Sunday, we'll see, but we'll be looking at the readings for the first Sunday of Lent, which would be the 3 temptations of Christ. So we'll be going ahead, so we'll have the whole week to think about and to ponder and to pray about our gospel readings. And our group will meet for 6 weeks. I found that that's a good time. You're not committing forever, and usually about an hour. All of these things we've gone over are really important. Everything that's shared is confidential. If you're not chatty, you don't have to chat. But so what this has already done for me is connected me to people here in our church. I've been coming for quite a while, and I know some choir members, some people from the Croc. That's about it. Anyway, so it's a really good way to come together. We only have 4 people right now in our group. We're looking for more. I think 8 to 10, maybe?
That's a nice size, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice size. But if you're like the Benedictine group, there's a lot. So that's why we're not going to tell you you should only have this. So but a small group, yeah.
So anyway, that's the deal. If you're interested at all, come talk to me. Give me your email address if you got to think about it. But it's an invitation, and this is really, really a wonderful way to, like Father said, to come to fall in love with each other. Thank you.
And Gwen, that's wonderful. So now already we have 3 people that will step forward and can visit with you after our presentation. And I'd encourage you, another thing you might want to look at is around the Lenten Circle, because that is specifically during Lent, focusing on the readings for the next Sunday. So if that's something you'd like to do, that resource is there. Any other questions?
You guys have been here a long time this morning.
Congratulations. So we'll wrap it up, and then please feel free to visit the back table to pick up your puzzle piece, the poem, take a look at the resources available, and to answer questions from some of these ladies that are already stepping forward. Should we say in the name? Hail Mary.
Let's close in prayer. Just saying together, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.